you don't know if something is possible until you ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. You heard me? Hi, homies. Over the past 4-ish years, I have run money at home, and I have showed you guys how to make the most out of your rentals. But one of the biggest complaints that I get is when people say, I would never do this in a rental. I would never do that in a rental. And while I understand all of that, I think the reason a lot of people won't do that is because they don't know how to get their landlord to say yes to something, and they don't know how to get their landlords to pay for stuff. So I have a few tips that I want to share. I've got some stories that I think will help you guys out. And if you notice at any point that my outfit completely changes and the lighting changes and it looks like a different day, no, you didn't. If you want to be the person who's making massive, big, fabulous, fun changes in your rental, and hear me out, the work starts before you sign the lease. I know that sounds insane because, Imani, how do you expect to change an apartment up if you don't have a lease? Here's the thing. Leases are contracts. Contracts are meant to be negotiated. Your strongest negotiating position is before you sign the legally binding contract. So when you are on your apartment tour, I need you guys to do the work of asking the potential landlord or property manager legitimate questions. Ask them if they are okay with you making changes to the apartment. Ask them if they would let you paint. Ask them if they're set on this light fixture or if you're able to change it up. Story time. When I was going from moving in my studio apartment to wanting to move to a 2-bedroom apartment, I looked at so many different places. And one of the places that I looked at that I thought I was going to move into, it was being rented by a private landlord. It was in DuPont Circle. The price was right. It was very cute. But when we got on the phone, I asked her, hey, I like the apartment. I like the look. Would you be okay if I painted? She sat very quietly for a moment, and then she popped up and she said, well, I just don't understand why you would want to paint. I paid a lot of money to paint this apartment. It's beautiful. You shouldn't want to paint. But that interaction told me that this person was not going to be okay with me doing anything in this apartment. And it is her right to feel that way because it's her apartment. But that just meant that it wasn't the place for me. You definitely need to think about getting the right place with the right landlord before you even sign the lease. Now that takes me into tip number 2. When I wanted to make more drastic changes in my studio apartment, like adding a $6,000 faucet, and we can talk in a separate video why it is $6,000. That's neither here nor there. But when I wanted to do that, I felt like I had to ask my landlord for permission. And so I sent them an email. And after I had sent this email and I had been posting on Imani at Home for a while, so many people asked me, how did you get your landlord to approve this? How did you get your landlord to say yes to this? And in my mind, it was kind of obvious that I had just asked and then they said yes and then I started doing it. But then I realized that some people, they may know what they want and they may know what they desire, but they don't know how to ask for that. And that is why I've created the landlord email template. Now, this template is based off of the email that I sent my first landlord as well as the landlord that I have for this property. And it basically lists up at the top who you are, how long you've been in the building, and some just key facts about yourself. Second paragraph, you're going to go into any of the changes that you want to make in the space. You can link to videos of other renters doing it. You can link to products that you want to use. And all of this will clue your landlord in that you have thought this out fully. Now, I'm not saying if you send this email that you're going to get what you want, because, hey, I don't know, and don't hold me to that. But what I am saying is that you don't know if something is possible until you ask. Closed mouths don't get fed. You heard me? I had a friend who has lived in the same apartment for 5 years. Him and 3 to 4 other guys, they've all lived in there. They love to cook. They're all chefs, yada, yada, yada. And guess what? They live there with no dishwasher. And as a person who just got a dishwasher for the first time living in this apartment, I can tell you, living without one, kind of ghetto, a little awful, can't deny. One day we're talking and he's complaining to me about how awful it is that he doesn't have a dishwasher. And I said, oh, why don't you just ask your landlord for a dishwasher? He just was like, oh, I didn't know that that was something that I could ask for. So I sent him the link to the landlord email template. I told him to download it. He fills it out. And guess what? 2 weeks later, he had a dishwasher. Lowe's was out there taking out a cabinet, putting in a nice 24-inch GE profile. And like all of that, like he has spent 5 years complaining about not having this thing in his rental. And then within 2 weeks, his landlord purchased it, installed it. It was there. They were using it. And guess what? When it came time to renew the lease, the landlord didn't even raise their rent. Run your mouth. If you want something, ask for it. If you need something, ask for it. And if you feel uncomfortable or you don't know what to say or how to say it, download the landlord email template. The link is in the description box, and it'll help you find the words to say what you need to say so that you can have the apartment of your dreams, just like the 5,000 other people who've downloaded the template. And now we're going to meet Imani from another day with more tips on how to get your landlord to pay for some because I'm not saying that this was an editing mistake and I accidentally deleted an entire file of this whole video, but that is what happened. So the rest of the tips that I have for you come directly from an article that I did with Domino, because if you've been following me on Instagram, you know that I did a kitchen renovation last year. That beautiful, red, gorgeous, sexy, hot kitchen. I did that with my bare friggin' hands. And I did get my landlord to pay for a little bit of that. In terms of the kitchen, here's what my landlord paid for it. They gave me a $2,700 credit to cover the cost of the microwave, the fridge, and the cabinetry. They paid for a new stove and a new dishwasher. They did all of the demolition. They put in new drywall in the back and a new subfloor. Now, I don't know how much that portion of the project cost. What I paid for out of pocket, a couple $100. I spent about $150 on the flooring. I spent a little over $150 on the hardware, which was from Etsy, and I absolutely love it. And I spent some money on the new countertop, which is also from IKEA. It's laminate, pretty good. And I did buy a few new tools in order to complete the project, but I'd say all in all, of my personal money, I probably put in less than $1,000. So if you're going to listen to anybody, listen to me. So I sat down with Lydia last year to talk about how I got my landlord to pay for this, and I gave her some great tips, and I just want to give those tips back to you, back to y'all, the YouTube fam. And if you haven't seen the kitchen renovation, definitely go check it out. It's over on Instagram. It's like a 5-part series. It's pretty good if I do say so myself. My third tip is to identify your advocate. The reason this is so important is because when you are dealing with a problem, it is always best to have people there that are on your side, that are on your team, that like you, okay? Because those are going to be the people who are going to help you get done what you want. And so you don't have to be the only person fighting for you. My advocate was the handyman in my building. He's been working on this building for 40 years. He knows its problems, and more importantly, he has known the owner of the building for well over 40 years. So when I was, bitching, to be honest, to him about all of the problems, he was sort of like, let me see what I can do. Let me see what I can make happen. And he was on my team. So before the landlord had even approved giving me the credit or anything, my handyman had already said that he was going to bring me a new stove and he was going to make sure that things got taken care of. Your advocate doesn't have to be a handyman. It could literally be anybody who is like connected to your landlord or your property manager, anybody. And that's why I always say, like, it's really important to build relationships with those people. If you bake cookies, send some cookies down to the property manager office. Send some cookies down to the leasing office. You know what I'm trying to say? When you're walking in and out of the building and you see those people, you say hello. Pop over to your property manager. If they have an office that's not connected to your building, pop over there every now and again and like drop something off. Or just to say, oh, hello, I just wanted to put a face to the name. I saw that there was like somebody sending new emails from the building. Show up to those community events if they have them. If they ask for feedback in any possible way, be the person who sends feedback at the very least so that they can get familiar with your name And that way, when you go to like put in your request and put in your stuff, they know who you are. Like, you're not a nameless, faceless person. You're a real person who is paying rent on time, every time. Okay? Bonus tip, bonus tip, bonus tip, bonus tip. I know everybody wants to live in the like luxury buildings. Everybody wants the amenities. Everybody wants the 3 pendant lights with the waterfall edge and like the Caesar stone countertops. I know everybody wants that, but let me be real here. The more corporate your apartment company, rental, leasing agency, whatever is, the less drastic of the changes they're going to be willing to let you make. That's the tea. That is the truth. I have done pretty much all of this in buildings that are well over 100 years old. And what I think you find is that the less involved the landlord, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to do some of this stuff. Like I said, if you're owned by one of those like corporate mega developer type companies, baby, they're like, I'm not saying you can't get some stuff done. I do know people who do, but you know, those people are doing like inspections every 4 months. It's kind of, you know, you're not really going to be able to get done as much as you can in an older building. And I think that's sort of the balance between, you know, like these older buildings, you might not get all of the amenities that you want, but you are probably going to have a leasing agency or a landlord that is doing less oversight. So this is just something that I think you have to be aware of when you're doing the apartment search process. What is more important to you? Do you want all the bells and whistles and the amenities, or do you want the ability to, you know, make the most out of your rental? You have to decide that for yourself. Me personally, I've decided that I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want up in here. And so therefore I like a landlord who's a little bit less involved in my business, if you catch my drift. This might be the most important tip I give y'all. Don't push every button at your disposal. But when you are reaching out to your landlord, you need to make sure that you personally have identified what is most important to you. For example, if you send your landlord a list of 5 things, I want to change the kitchen, I want to replace the light fixtures, I want to add some peel and stick wallpaper, I want to refinish the floors, and I want to, I don't know, rip out the kitchen. You have to decide what things on that list are most important to you and fight for 1 or 2 of those. Because if you have like a landlord that don't care, they might give you all 5, but they might not. So when you go into this negotiation, or you're talking to your landlord, or you're like going back and forth via email, figure out what is most important to you and fight for that. Because if you try to go and fight for everything and you're like, yeah, I want a $20,000 kitchen renovation, you're probably not going to get that because your ask is unreasonable given the situation. So just be strategic in what you ask for, you know? Ask for 1 or 2 really kind of like expensive, labor intensive things, and then throw in like 5 or 6 little things that don't really matter, you know? Because if you're arguing about ripping out a kitchen, peel and stick wallpaper don't really seem like that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? You know? You cannot go into a negotiation thinking, if I don't get everything that I want, I'm going to be upset. Because at its core, negotiating is about compromise. You're never going to get everything that you want, but you can fight for the things that you really want and really focus in on those things and let the things that you don't really care about go by the wayside. Okay? I did say the last tip was the most important tip, but this actually might be the most important one. You got to know your rights. Do not take this as legal advice, because I don't know about all of the tenant rights, landlord rights, all of the situations all around the United States, and definitely not internationally. But I do have a pretty good understanding of the tenant rights here in Washington, D.C., where I live. And I very much so encourage all of you to go out there and research the tenant rights where you live. The easiest way to do it is search tenant rights plus your city search on Google. Now, don't go through those AI results that are at the top because they're awful, but do read down. And usually on like your city website or your state website, they will have a section that talks about housing, renting, and whatever. And I want you to read through whatever it is that they have to say so that you understand what your rights are. Now, for the majority of it, it will be things like you can't discriminate against somebody for the color of their skin or any other protected class. But what I think is pretty common amongst a lot of the things that I've read is that tenants are pretty much entitled to like a safe, secure, and like healthy place of living. Meaning it can't be a piece of shit. Now, I'm not talking like your dishwasher doesn't work, but I'm talking like the wall is cracked out and there's a hole in the ceiling. Of course, there are slumlords out there. Of course, there are people out there. And of course, there are places in the United States where tenant rights are stronger than others. For example, DC and New York have pretty strong tenant rights. I know it may not seem like they do, but they do. So I definitely want you guys to know what your rights are. I showed you guys how to search for them. If your landlord is handling actual problems in a timely manner and, they address your concerns and you feel like, your things are getting done in a timely manner or such, I don't necessarily think shouting out your tenant rights is the best way to like deal with a problem. Again, we're talking about finesse here, right? But if you get into a situation when your landlord is not responsive, they're not following up, or they're not doing what they're supposed to, or the situation that you're dealing with is like really precarious or really unhealthy or potentially dangerous, knowing your tenant rights and communicating to your property manager or landlord that you are aware of your tenant rights and you are willing to go to court about some stuff is super helpful. During the course of my kitchen renovation, my landlord was like stalling on some things where they just wouldn't answer emails. And it got to a point where I was so frustrated that I actually reached out to the DC Tenant Rights Center. Now, I did not go through the process of actually suing my landlord because it didn't come to that, but I did have an introductory call with a lawyer, and I basically just asked them some questions like, hey, I'm having this problem. What should I do? They told me that I could reach out to the Department of Buildings and I could report them, which I did. And that could definitely encourage my landlord to do the things that they were supposed to do, which they did. So in your city, figure out whatever legal recourse you have in order to get your landlord to do the things that you need to do. But you also want to be careful when you are sort of displaying your knowledge about your rights. Like I said, if the situation is being handled in a timely manner and they're doing what they're supposed to do, coming in hot with the I know my rights, I'm going to sue you type of rhetoric is really just unhelpful. And it kind of doesn't make people want to help you because you seem annoying. You got to know how to wield a conversation. You got to know how to wield information and wield a conversation to get what you want. And sometimes you lead with honey. If they come back with vinegar, then you bite them bitches in the ass. I don't know if that's a common phrase, but I'm saying it. Now, my final tip to everyone who wants to make changes in their rental, they want to make the most out of their rental, and they want their landlord to pay for a little something, is you have to create a paper trail. When you move in, the day you get those keys, you need to go through and take a picture of everything. Photos, videos, timestamps. Put the little the newspaper up in the video so that you can show the date that the video was taken, a la Scandal, when Olivia Pope got kidnapped. The reason I'm telling you to do that is because when you move out, if you have no proof of what the place looked like before you got there, your landlord could charge you up the wazoo, out the ass, for any little teeny tiny problem that they saw or they see or they want in order to keep your security deposit. And we don't want that to happen. So you better start creating that paper trail early. Now, the other side of this, any communication that happens, sometimes, just like all people, people like to play with people who they think won't give them what they want, or they won't give them a hard time, or they won't be too annoying. And when you prove yourself to be a person who keeps files, who keeps messages, who sends memos, people typically don't want to play with you because they know you don't be on that bullshit. For example, when I was sort of dealing with the situation with my landlord, or the property manager to be more specific, they would call me. And the thing about phone calls is that it becomes hearsay. Like, who said what? I don't know. People forget. It's really hard to 6 months from now remember exactly what you said and exactly what they said in a phone call. No matter how good you think your memory is, you will forget very important things. I didn't like that, because they would say things on the call that they would not say over email. So what I started to do was, as soon as we went click, I would head right on over here to this here laptop, and I would type out a memo outlining everything that was said on the call. And I would reference back to emails or photos or ticket numbers in the ticket system that I had put in previously, so that they knew not to play with me. So for me, I feel like it is best to over communicate and have proof of every single thing that's going on. And you definitely need to save it in 2 places at least. All of the text messages that I have on my phone, I never delete them. But I also take screenshots of them and I send them over to my laptop, and I keep them in an email file in my email, which is backed up in the cloud in Google. And then I also keep them on my computer, like locally, because just in case I accidentally delete something, I still have it somewhere. And that type of stuff is so important when you need something. Actually, I'll give you another example, because this has come up a lot in my Instagram comments. So if you know my kitchen, I have a beautiful Waterworks faucet, but in that video, a lot of people love to tell me, oh, well, because you installed that faucet, it now belongs to your landlord. They can keep it. No, in some places, depending on what your lease says and depending on the laws of where you live, that could be true. But this is why it's also important to have conversations locally and to keep those files. When I moved in here, I listed out all of the things that I wanted to do in my rental, right? I said that I wanted to change out the sink and I wanted to install my own faucet. And I said, oh, I'm okay with you guys keeping the sink. I'm okay with you guys keeping the new fridge, but I would be taking my faucet with me. In their reply, they have already agreed to that, and it is in writing. It is so important to get things in writing, because if for any reason it came down to like us arguing about this, I already have in writing that you already agreed to me taking the faucet. So come 5 years from now, when I move out of this apartment, we shouldn't have no issues, because you've already agreed to me taking it. I've said that this is what I wanted to do. You agreed to it. The knick-knack is in the paddywhack, and it made it go black. That's not a real saying either, but we're going to go with it. I do hope that you take the tips that I've shared in this video with all of the other tips that I've shared over on Instagram and here on YouTube, and you combine those so that you can go out and create the most beautiful apartment you could have ever dreamed of. Okay, homies? Make sure y'all like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to see more Imani at home, I upload every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m., so make sure you turn on that bell notification so you never miss a video, and send it to your grandma, because I do really well with the over 60 demographic, and they think I'm really funny and cute, and I love grandmas, and yeah, I would just love to hang out with a lot of y'all grandmas. So please send this to your grandma, send this to your best friend, send this to your auntie. And in case you guys needed the reminder, it does not matter if you rent or if you own. Everyone, and I do mean everyone, deserves to love their home. Bye, homies.